رب العالمين. والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا ما تعلمنا وزدنا بفضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. There's two or three things I want to talk about. First thing is about the ijma'. Second thing then is about the nakira fi siyaq and nafi. And then I want to go through some examples with af'al as well. Okay, bismillah. So, very, very briefly, right? We looked at ijma'. And ijma' is really, really, really important. And we mentioned Ibn Hazm, Ibn Hazm al-Zahiri. The whole Zahiri approach is kind of a inshallah sincere, right? No, like, we leave that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But basically an immature interaction with doubt. Okay, an immature interaction with doubt. Now, the Sharia sometimes tells us to totally ignore doubt, right? So, do we have any Malikis here? No? But, for example, for the Jumhur, um, we're going to say, for example, you doubt your prayer, you doubt whether you have wudu, right? So what do we say? Like, how does that work? Go ahead, Arias, yeah.
If we finish it, like if we finish the prayer, we should just ignore it.
Okay.
And if we are like in the prayer and we are not sure if we are like in the third or fourth rak'ah, we should just make an extra rak'ah.
Okay. But basically, what if it's very likely that you've done 4 rakahs? So you're 85% sure that you've done 4 rakahs. What do you do?
Mm, I'm
Go ahead,
not
Dia.
sure right now.
Go ahead, Dia.
Well, then basically you work with that, then
Mm-hmm.
you make sujood sahu.
Okay, so notice, and that's what the Prophet ﷺ told us to do, right? He said basically, how should we interact with shak? Like you ignore it. Like you say, there's a shak, meaning this is mashkuk fi, therefore لا ينظر إليه, لا يلتفت إليه أصلا. It's ignored totally, right? So there are things like that in the Sharia, but generally, the Sharia is asking us to act upon dhan. Okay? So what does Ibn Hazm do? Ibn Hazm, another Zahiris, they say, look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't like dhan. Allah likes yaqeen, right? And he talks about yaqeen, yaqeen, yaqeen. Okay? So we come to questions, why would you have, for example, dhan? Oh, for example, qiyas, right? And when I'm doing qiyas, I don't know what I'm doing, right? Like I'm lost. You look at, for example, we come to Bab al-Riba, and we say the Prophet said, don't sell X for Y, this, right? And so you can't sell wheat for wheat or barley for barley unless it's equal for equal and take for take. So we come to that chapter and we say, look, Hanafi say one thing, the illah was this. Maliki say something else. Shafi say something else. Basically, you guys were making it up. Like you don't understand, right? That's what it is. Like you don't understand what's going on. So when you do qiyas, you don't know what's going on. You guys come along and do sad al and you make up the deen, you don't know what's going on. You come along and do istislah, you make up things. You come along and we use a weak hadith, you don't know what's going on. So what he does is he narrows things down as much as possible, right? So he basically says we have those 4 things. Um, I'm not going to share the screen right now because it's not very useful. But you have these 4 things. We've got qiyas, which is mashkuk anyway, so just forget about it. So there's no qiyas. Don't do qiyas because it leads to dhann, right? And dhann is not good, right? Um, then we have, for example, Quran and Sunnah. Okay, we're going to leave anything that's da'if, right? So the hadith is weak, we're going to ignore it, right? Which in itself is problematic, right? In reality, that's problematic. But he says, khalas, the hadith is any weak hadith, we're going to ignore it. So I'm going to deal with Sahih hadith because that's fact, right? And we're going to discuss that in a second. A hadith, Sahih is a fact, right? Quran because it's fact, and ijma'. But when we deal with ijma', I'm going to ignore any kind of ijma' that is dhanni, that is probabilistic. Okay, and this is really, really important. The first part is really important, right, to shaping the modern Salafi mind, right, which is hadith sahih is fact, right? That's pretty important, which is not. Okay, but anyway, that's useful. It's interesting. The other issue then is that I'm going to ignore any kind of ijma' that isn't fact. Okay, so that's why we said we're going to break down. We were going to break down ijma' into different categories. Give me 1 second, please. Somebody. Okay, I'm just going to put this in the. I don't know how to do. I always have these issues with the using my whiteboard. I'm just going to use it anyway. I'm not sure how to do this. Uh, okay, so there's basically three or four variables that we can use um, when looking at ijma'. Okay, one are these words, actions, or passive agreement? Right, I'm sure there's another word I can use for it, passive agreement, but right, that's one variable. I'll go through these one by one. Okay, and then the second is this of the Sahaba or afterwards? Right, and the third variable is this mutawatir, sahih, or daif? Okay, so let's take a scenario. Okay, you are alive during the time of the Sahaba. They all did X. They all said X. They all said it is halal to eat rabbits, for example. They all did certain things. They all, I don't know, left Medina. Like it's halal to live outside of Medina by ijma'. So many Sahaba left Medina, so it must be halal to leave Medina, right? Can't be haram, right? And then there's passive agreement. Somebody did something. Sha'a wa intashara, right? This became widespread. Everybody knew that so and so, the Sahabi did this or said this, and nobody said anything against it. Okay, so this is al-ijma' al-qawli. They all said it is halal to do this. Al-ijma' al-fi'li. They all did something. Al-ijma' al-sukuti, sukut, right? Sakatu anhu. So it was widespread. Everybody knew that Ibn Abbas did X. Everybody knew that Sayyidina Umar did X. Had it been haram, somebody would have said it. Nobody said anything. So therefore, that's ijma'. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, just give me 1 second, please. Okay, so that's first variable. Okay, second variable then is who said it was halal? The Sahaba. Who did it? The Sahaba. Who knew about it and then did, there was no inkar. Nobody said that's haram, right? Was it Sahaba or was it somebody else? Okay. And now, whether it was Sahaba or somebody else, it's now mutawatir that the Sahaba did, said, or were silent about something. Or it is sahih. You have a chain of transmission that is sahih that the Sahaba or somebody else did or said or were passive, or it's da'if. Okay? So these are different levels of ijma'. So we're going to have 3 times 2 times 3 equals what?
18.
18. Okay? Why is this important? Because in reality, as a talib ilm, right, and as a bahith and a researcher, you will actually come across these things, right? So for example, we all know that this ijma' that Taraweeh is 20 rakats, right?
Mm,
It's ijma',
mm,
right?
I
no.
don't think so.
This ijma'. If you challenge ijma', you got problems, bro. So what are you going to ask me now? What are you going to ask me now? You say freedom, Jazakum khair, Sheikh Fidi, we respect you, mashallah. You know, people will say things, and you're like, Habibi, is that actual ijma'? Like ijma' of whom? Right? Is it, like where is that well, all the Sahaba, the whole of Sahaba, they all prayed 20 rak'ahs. Like you're not going to be able to find that, right? You're not going to be able to find that. So what do you mean is you mean afterwards? Okay, fine. Tabi'in then. Which tabi'in? Which generation? And then you say, oh, so you're gonna find that it's gonna be very difficult to prove that. So is it mutawatir? Are you saying this mutawatir? Or are you saying it's sahih? Or are you saying it's da'if? Or are you saying this is just crazy? Right? So a lot of times people claim ijma', right? They'll say bil ijma', khalas. And what they don't, it's not very accurate. It's not very accurate at all. And just on the side, there are 2 books that we should be careful of whenever we quote ijma', right? Uh, so Ibn Mundir has a book on ijma'. I believe it's called Al Ijma'. I can't remember what it's called. It's a small book. He'll say, for example, everybody agrees on this apart from so and so. Everybody agrees upon that apart from so and so, right? It's just a useful book, right? Um, I can't. Somebody could look it up, Google it. Ibn Mundir's book on ijma'. I think it's called ijma'. And then Ibn Abdul Barr also. So Ibn Abdul Barr will frequently mention in the Tamheed or Istidhkar, he'll say there's ijma' on this. Now, the issue is there's ijma' as far as he knows, right? As far as he knows, there's ijma' on this. So sometimes there's more information that hasn't reached you, right? And this is the default, ladies and gentlemen, right? The default is variety in the world, right? You travel the world, right? You're never going to see 2 people who are alike. You travel the world, you never see 2 countries that are alike. You travel the world, you never see 2 situations that are alike. They're similar, but they're different. You see different people, different animals, different this. You go back into the past, and there's the number of animals that probably did exist on planet Earth are far more than we actually know, right? The things are much more complex. Like the default is complexity and variety. So you say the Sahaba all did this, really? Like they all did that, right? Most likely, there's lots of different ways that they responded. Say, oh, the Sahaba, they had 2 approaches to this political issue. They probably had 5, right? The default is variety, right? What does a cowboy look like? This is not a stupid question. It's a very real question, right? What does a cowboy look like?
He has a hat on and some boots.
Has cats on, boots. What does he do? What does he ride?
A Horse. horse.
A horse. He rides a horse, okay? And what does he move around the country?
Moves cattle.
Cattle. Okay, does he shoot a gun?
Possibly.
Possibly.
Yes.
Is he a good shooter?
He's a good shooter, yes.
Right. So can you see this is exactly like the what's it called? The archetype. You know these archetypes? You know what I mean by archetypes? You have this word in German, guys?
Yes, we have it.
Yeah,
Yes.
archetype, right? It's not even English, right? So these archetypes, this is what we do. We go along, we see all witches look like this. They don't. All witchcraft is like this. It's not. All cowboys are like this. Like they're all gunslingers. They shoot this kind of gun, and it's like that's not how it was. You're gonna have lots of different kind of people who work with these things, lots of different kind of levels of safety and law and order in America in certain times. From this decade to that decade, it changes. What we do is we put it all as one thing, right? This is what it is, right? We try and simplify things, right? We create ajnas in our head, right? So or we, that's I'm not talking about that mantiq, but I'm talking about like oh the Sahaba they were all like this. It's not the case, right? We like to simplify things, but they're not. So it's very easy to you have an idea in your mind. The Sahaba they all agree on this, right? They've always said this. There's a lot of mubalaghat, right? A lot of mubalaghat. It's like that's not really true, right? Because the default is humans, and the default in nature is lots of variation. Things are really, really varied, right? And they aren't all homogeneous, not all the same, right? So I'm Deobandi, for example. Not to, I love Deobandis that so I view the Sahaba all as Deobandi, right? I'm Ikhwani. I view the Sahaba as Ikhwani. I'm Sufi, and like in my mind, the Sahaba all doing like Hadra all the time, right? It's like Habibi, right? That's a gross oversimplification of how people are and how the Sahaba or Tabi'een or Muslims or history or whatever it is. The default is things are really, really varied, right? Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes.
So now what does Ibn Hazm do then? And this is important too when we're talking to people today, is I'm going to come along as I'm going to say Mutawatir and Sahih are the same, right? Because he's already said that Sahih Hadith is fact. So I'm going to say this doesn't count, right? Which makes sense, right? Da'if, we're going to cut that out. I'm going to put it down here. That doesn't count. Okay, we're going to say doesn't count, right? Ignore Da'if, which is fair, right? There's a Da'if narration. Okay, just ignore that. Okay. Ijma' Sukuti as well. We're going to cut that out. Put it down here, right? And the Usuliyin in general, they agree with this. They say when you say ijma' sukuti is not ijma'. Ijma' is when they all said or did. Ijma' sukuti is a hujjah, but that's a hujjah mustaqillah, right? That's something a different hujjah, right? That's not what we mean by ijma'. Okay? And then he comes along and says, this is really important, really, really important. Is Sahaba and afterwards, khalas, if the Sahaba didn't agree on something, it's now set in stone as disagreed upon. Khalas. That's how it is. Right? So now, after the Sahaba, done. So now I have something that's mutawatir or sahih that the Sahaba said or did. Okay? So now, number one, it's very limited. Very limited. Okay, so now the scenarios where I can come along and say it's ijma' that the Sahaba did this, Sahaba said this, very few, because it's very difficult to prove that they all said and did, right? Okay, so number one. Number two, anything that the tabi'een or atba' tabi'een, just ignore it. So four schools, I don't really care, right? It doesn't matter. Tabi'een, that doesn't matter. So I'm interested in the Sahaba all said, the Sahaba all did. That's it. That's the only thing that counts as ijma'. So that means there's a lot of leeway. There's tons of leeway. You can just kind of do whatever you want. And that is exactly why his books were brought back into the Talib Ilm slash Sheikh's library. It used to be there as, oh, there's a guy historically who said that. Okay, historically somebody said that, and it's just there, right? And it's kind of interesting. We just put it on the shelf, like the Mu'tazila, right? But imagine if I start teaching i'tizal in high school, in college, and it's like part of, normal thing. So Ibn Hazm is here in order to make the deen more loose. That's why he's here. He had good intentions, inshallah ta'ala. Inshallah, he's a righteous person. He will answer for his benefit, his good deeds or bad deeds, and whatever. Okay? But the reason why it's here is basically to take the deen apart. We have people taking one side, someone's going to take Bukhari and Sahih Bukhari and Muslim apart from one side, someone else is going to take the form of madhhab on another side, someone else is going to question this, someone question that, and eventually there's no deen. That's the goal. All right, that's the goal. Go ahead, Muhammad Amin.
Is the ijma' of other than the Sahaba scenario, like the Sahaba disagreed and then the Tabi'een agreed, or is it like a nazila that came at the time of the Tabi'een and they all agreed?
Okay, that there will be differences there, but this is important, Muhammad, okay? Is if you could imagine, okay, this is how we see the deen, okay? When we look back, there is always more ikhtilaf. 1 second, copy and paste. Right? If you could imagine on any mas'ala, okay, the issue, for example, about touching your private parts, okay, does it break your wudu or not? You're going to find like 50 different positions on this among the Sahaba, right? So you're going to have the Sahaba, they're going to have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different positions on it, okay? What's going to happen or a madhhab, right? So what's going to happen is you're going to find that the second generation, and this is very important. So Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, in his book on Falling the Four Madhahib, he talks about this, right? Is you will find that there's lots of variation among the first people, right? Then what happens is next generation, they come along, and some of these positions are ignored. So what happens, for example, is let's give them. Can I write? Let's give them position A, position B, position C, position D, position E, position F. Okay, there's lots of variation. Okay, then what comes along? You come along and you suddenly there's just A and D. For example, let's put C here 1 second. Line this up nicely. Okay, position A survived. Position D survived. Right? And a few of them had position F. Okay? Very few. And then by the next generation, you found that everybody had either position A or position D. That's it. Okay. Now Imam Ahmad comes to the scene, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Malik, right? And they're choosing between A and D, right? And then the four madhahib agree on A and D. So 1,200 years of A and D, and then suddenly 21st century, no, I want B. So what's wrong with B is 1,200 years of scholars have said that's wrong. Right? So it's not that it's in principle wrong, but it's like so many people. So that's now called shadh. So this is what Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali tells us in his book Rad ala man lam yaltazim or lam yatba' al-madahib al-arba', right? It's in English. It deserves to be in German if anybody needs to translate it. It's a very small book, right? It should be in German as well, right? Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, he writes that book. He writes, right, was it Fadl Fadl ilm al-salaf ala ilm al-khalaf, right? But at the same time he writes this other book that you have to follow the form of madhhab, right? So why? Because the Sahaba and Tabi'een, they had this aversion to aqwal shadha. Whenever they found themselves here, they're like, oh, there's something wrong with me. Sayyidina Ali, he has a certain position on the walad. and he's a female slave who gives birth to her master's slave, master's child. He said, "Khalas, there's no, she's still a slave, right?" The Jumhur of the Sahaba said, no, she's free. So Sayyidina Ali was like, I don't see your dalil, but I prefer you stick with you than with me, right? So the next generation accepts that. That's now ijma', khalas, the walad, she's free. Okay? Next generation, other debates, etc. So what happens is the ummah is self-editing from generation to generation. And that is important because now when generation A said A, and generation B said A, and generation C said A, this is a solid argument, right? You can't debate it anymore. It is fact, right? It is fact that is valid. It's not fact that is true, but it's fact that is valid. As opposed to, is it fact that B is valid? No. Or C? No. Or F, right? So, mut'a, right? Ibn Abbas allegedly. His students pretty clearly. And then, khalas, by the time of that, an end of story, done. So now you come along and you revive something that was dead. Right? How? Because you say, I only care about this ijma'. So for Ibn Hazm, you come along with position G. No, you can't have position G. Can't do that. Right? But his thing is, khalas, the Sahaba agreed to disagree on these 6 positions. You can't now disagree anymore. Khalas, they're now valid. End of story. Okay? You can't. So what we say, no, the opposite. And this is the nature of civilization. Right? And my son, he's into zoology, right? So he was talking about marsupials, right? So he said there was a time when marsupials were super popular around the world, like they were everywhere. And then over time, they were only found in Australasia. Okay, why? Because they're not that good. Compared to other mammals, they're not that good. Right? It is survival of the fittest, meaning that the strongest evidence survives, the strongest position survives. And that is part of the way that the civilization works, right? The strongest position. So now, Hanbali school, 2 positions, 1. Notice that, right? And now that position is there, okay? And then the next generation agree, okay? Bit of debate, right? And now it's done, khalas, right? So now, like the Ummah for the last 500 years, for the last 800 years, has said the deen of Allah is A, B, or C, and not A, B, C, or D, or E, or G, or F, or H, I, whatever, I. So this is the weight of precedence. That A has a precedence, A has a precedence, A has a precedence. Okay, it's real. C has a precedence, but the next generation of the Tabi'een said no to it. And you now want to revive it. There's a reason why they didn't accept it. This now becomes cold shadh. It's weird, right? And you want to revive it, right? So this is what my friend who was Salafi said, this is what we used to do. We used to go and find these positions, find C, find a hadith that agrees with it, and go. There we go, right? But the problem is, many problems, but one of the problems is the Ummah has already looked at what you're looking at and more, and has already agreed that that's wrong. But like Ibn Hazm, you don't care what the Ummah has said. It doesn't mean anything to you. Because there's no ijma'. Like this is the only thing, this is the only thing that counts. After, it doesn't matter. This self-editing process is meaningless to you. You don't believe in it. But the self-editing process is one of the reasons why you have strong madhabs, right? And so this self-editing thing, Ibn Rajab talks about it in the time of the Tabi'een, right? Certain Tabi'een having opinion and people rejecting it. Like, what are you doing? This is weird, right? So this is very important. Like, and I remember one of my friends and teachers, Sheikh Dr. Talal Azam, he's in I believe Cambridge Muslim College. He said, the scholars they play games, right? People will have, people they toy with a discussion, right? And they look at something, right? I looked at it for 50 years. from three angles. The next generation looked at it. The next generation looks at it. When they agree with me, that means my position has weight. When they disagree with me, that means my position does not have weight. There's a reason why the certain positions exist and certain positions don't exist. In and of themselves, sometimes the dalil kind of sounds a bit weak, right? And I'll give you an example of that, right? Like, we Malikis, Shafi'is, and Hanbalis, right? What do we do when we come out of a coma or become sane in Asr time? What do we do?
Is it pray Dhuhr and Asr?
قضاء or أداء? Is this a qada prayer? Are we doing qada of dhuhr?
For us, yeah,
أداء.
because it's
You call it qada?
I think so. I'm not sure.
I don't think you call it because that's because you're in waqt daruri, right?
No, for us it's not waqt ضروري. It's just because if you had done jam', it would extend time to Asr, but it's not waqt ضروري. It's qada. Normally, if you pray Dhuhr during the time of Asr, it would be qada.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, how we label it, we three madhahib, we agree that because you could join dhuhr with asr for a haja, like safar, right, or sickness or something like that, right? You could join it for a haja, that you have to join it for darura. The argument is not very strong if you think about it, because you can't pray when you're insane. You're not allowed to pray when you're insane. There's a big difference between somebody who is obliged to pray dhuhr and then prays it in asr time versus somebody who is not obliged to pray dhuhr to begin with, right? So I come along and say, what's your dalil? Like, oh, my dalil is you could join it for this. Like, it's kind of a bit of a lame argument. Like, the Hanafis say, no, you weren't obliged to pray dhuhr at all. You were insane. The dhuhr time ended and khalas, right? So we come along and, it's also interesting. In the Shafi school, one of our proofs is we have that qiyas. One of our proofs is the fuqaha as-sab' said it. The fuqaha of Medina said it. So imagine you're Imam Ahmad now. Imam Ahmad is wondering, do they have to pray it or not? Here are the people before me. He's looking at maybe 7 different positions or whatever, 3 different positions. And which camp should he be in? Right? There's already a camp for D. There's a analogy there. The fuqaha as-sab', the great fuqaha Medina said it. My Imam Shafi said it. Imam so-and-so said it. I'm going to say it. Right? And so what happens is when you find that a weak position or a kind of odd position or a not super obvious position is supported by generation after generation, that gives it strength, right? Having witnesses in marriage, right? The Malikis, they even debate it, right? On a certain level. So there isn't really a Sahih hadith on it. There isn't, you could debate it. But what you find is basically, so Imam Shafi says, we have a weak hadith and we have the majority of the Sahaba, right? Majority vote of the Sahaba and Tabi'een. So khalas, we're going to go with it. So it's very important. The former madhhab in general is normally the 90 to 80% vote of the Sahaba and Tabi'een. Anything that was just a 10% vote, 20% vote of the Sahaba and Tabi'een usually is ignored. Usually it's ignored. So that means any position that wasn't that strong, it got weeded out and is no longer here today. And now what we have is the most likely and the most strong understanding of the Quran and Sunnah, as opposed to something that is very unlikely to be true. Right? Very unlikely to be true. So we don't have time to talk about it now, but just put a little note in your thing and say, read Muqaddimat Ibn Khaldun, right? The whole point of civilization, what civilization does, right? Understanding civilization and understanding the form of madhhab is the same thing. It's the same thing. That a civilization has achieved something and it means something, as opposed to, we're just lame, So if you think about the former madhhab and colonialization, right? Here, Muhammad is speaking English, he speaks French. Why does he speak English and French? colonization. Why are you studying with some white dude, right? And then why in Tunisia? Why in Morocco? Why in Egypt? Why in Saudi? Why there'd be people be questioning the form of madhhab because they're questioning their very self, right? You question your very self. You've been conquered, and you've been made to question your very self. What happened to you, how you organized yourself, and your values, and how you looked at those things is all off. So now you have to question yourself. It's one and the same thing, one and the same process, right? It's just the whole thing. So the way that we see it is this ummah is guided, is doing the right thing. The Sahaba and Tabi'een, they edited out certain things. The Imams edited out certain things. And by the time we get to our period, there are certain things in our madhahib that have been edited out, right? Like that position doesn't exist anymore, right? So for example, drinking nabidh, right? So you find Sahaba drinking nabidh, you find Tabi'een drinking nabidh, you find Imam Abu Hanifa saying it's halal as long as this isn't the case, as long as that isn't the case, as long as with all these conditions, what happens? But in our time, by the time of the Sahibain and the people, the Imams of the Hanafi school, is this, right? We all agree now. You can't drink, you can't, if there was something that was alcoholic, is alcoholic and it is not drunk as a recreational drug and it's not done in that setting. Even so, it's still haram, right? The position of Imam Abu Hanifa is halal, right? Here's some alcoholic drink that you're not going to get drunk on. You're not doing it in a party setting. It's not done like this. It's some kind of thing like it's, like cough medicine that you drink for fun because it makes you relaxed, right? Like it's 40%, it's a 40% alcohol, but you can have a sip of it and it just helps your stomach and you just like it. It's not medicine. Medicine is something else, and that's not what we're talking about. But for a non-darura, right? Just drinking it because it relaxes you, right? That's the position of Imam Abu Hanifa. But notice what happened is after the Sahibain, eventually the Hanafis cut that out. The mufta bihi of the Hanafi school, it is haram. The mufta bihi, the mu'tamad, the madhhab, the mashhur, whatever it is of the Maliki, Shafi'i, Hanbali school, this is haram. You can't do that. Right? That's where we are now. Right? Even if it was there back there then, there's a reason why that happened. Right? And that's important. Right? The Sahaba, how many rak'ahs of Taraweeh? Few of them doing less, right? Many of them doing 20, 24, 26, 30, 46, right? Lots of rak'ahs. And eventually things come together at one point, like it's 20. Let's just do 20. There's a reason why that happened. And then you open each madhab and they say 20, 20. It's not a very strong dalil, right? And it's kind of like, well, the Sahaba and Tabi'een kind of, bit by bit said it was a good idea. But now, like, that's what we do. Khalas, it's 20, right? It's not fard, right? I'm sure there are other positions as well. I'm not saying it's ijma' proper, but the deen has gravitated, well, that's what it is. You open any textbook in the last 500 years and they say 20, 20, 20, 20, 20, right? And so this self-editing process is very, very important, and it eliminates fringe opinions. Sahaba made mistakes. Tabi'een made mistakes. Our Imams make mistakes. And so they make mistakes, and then it's edited out. If you don't accept this system, then you allow in the mistakes of people. The ummah cannot fix itself. Does that make sense? And then you leave things super open. Right? Super open, right? So it's very, very easy to destroy the deen. Very, very easy. Ignore ijma'. Just apply tasheeh and tada'if in your own way, right? Either you're just looking at ma'ani, for example, any hadith that doesn't make sense to me, I ignore it. Or any hadith that has any possible question in it whatsoever, right, is da'if, right? So just side point, write this down. This is the beginning of Al-Ahkam al-Wusta by Abd al-Haq al-Ishbili. Right? Abd al-Haq al-Ishbili has al-Sughra and a Wusta and a Kubra, hadith of Ahkam. He said, what I've mentioned here, These hadiths, I have not limited myself to mention hadiths that are 100% sahih. He says, because if I only accepted sahih hadiths that were 100% sahih, we wouldn't have much to play with, would we? Right? You pick up a hadith in Bukhari and say, well, this could be labeled as Hasan, right? Oh yeah, khalas, it's not sahih. Well, this hadith here, what about this? This hadith there, what about this? Right? It's very easy to pull out things and label any sahih hadith as da'if. Super easy. So you come along and start being exactly the Salafi movement, right? If you look at some of the students of Sheikh Albani, they were like that. Sheikh Albani, he said that. He said, one of my students, so I started critiquing Bukhari Muslim. He's now critiquing everything. He's like, this person's a shaitan that I made. I can't remember his name now, right? But you'll see these people. And then eventually they turn into Qur'aniyun, right? And eventually they turn into mulhidun, right? A super critique of hadiths, unbalanced, unnuanced, okay? And then you start questioning Bukhari and Muslim, and then you start questioning hadith science in general, and you start questioning everything apart from the Quran, and then you start questioning the Quran as well, because you have no sense of authority. So you question ijma'. First you question the form of madhhab, then you question ijma', then you question hadiths in a chaotic way, but then you have no deen left. Right? And that's exactly what our enemies want. That's exactly what they want. Right? That's why they promote things like that. So there's just no deen left. Right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Sheikh, does this also extend into the discussion of whether it's allowed to make taqleed of the non-official position of a madhhab, for example? Is it maybe limited to only
It
this strong
does.
khilaf?
It does. So if you wanted to, you could claim, I'm not saying you're right, but what you could say is the ijma' of the madhahib al-arba' is ijma'. وعلاوة على ذلك, on top of that, the ijma' of the relied upon position of the of each madhab is ijma'. So it also depends on how you look at these imams, right? Like, how do I look at Ibn Qudama? Is he a mujtahid or not? Is what's his name? Rayhabi, is his name?
Haybani.
Haybani? No, no.
Ruhaybani.
Rahaybani. Is he a mujtahid or not? So if I look at him, or Al-Mar' al-Karmi, do I look at him as a mujtahid or not? Do I look at Imam Nawawi as a mujtahid or not? So if I look at these people as mujtahideen, then it's ijma'. So I come along and you say, khalas, Imam Nawawi sifted out the Shafi'i school and said, this is the correct position. Ibn Qudama, later people, right? Bahuti, etc. Hashid ibn Abid-Din, Khalil, all these different people, if you look at them as mujtahid imams, which is not far-fetched, if we look at them as mujtahid imams, then there is ijma' on these positions. So my teacher, Sheikh Nuh Kella, if you look at his Reliance of the Traveller, he will never ever mention a non-relied upon position. So in the Shafi school, we basically have the four madhahib in our school, by the way. Right? If you look at any masala, we basically have the four madhahib in our school. But he doesn't mention the positions like that. He will mention the Maliki, the mashhur of the Maliki school, right? The relied upon position of the Hanbali school, the relied upon position of the Hanafi school. If there's difficulty, he says, the reader should be aware of these other positions because this is kind of hard in the Shafi school, right? He'll mention those things, but he'll never ever go outside of the mu'tamid in the school, right? And that has a wajh, there's an argument for that. Because if we look at these people as mujtahid imams, this is exactly what they're doing. And we say, listen, qarn al-tasi' mujtahidu ulama al-qarn al-tasi' ijtama'u ala kada. Right? Ajma'u ala kada. They say the deen of Allah is this. Right? You go and ask the mufti of the Hanafis in the 9th century, in the 10th century, 11th century, what is the deen of Allah? He says this. And you're going to ask this, and these people are not, I can't talk about the Hanbalis or the Malikis or Hanafis really, but in the Shafi'i school, you look at our muta'akhirin, they're not nobodies. Like Imam Nawawi is not a nobody. He's not somebody who doesn't know the deen of Allah. Like he's a mujtahid. That's why he goes against the madhhab sometimes. He has his own ikhtiyar. And after him, there's countless people like that. Al-Bulqini, Al-Suyuti, Al-Azra'i, right? Tons of people. They are, they have everything that you need to do ijtihad. You read Fath al-Bari by Ibn Hajar Asqalani, he's not a mujtahid. Like he's just a muqallid. That's a bit odd to say he's just a muqallid, right? So there's an argument to say that A, the four madhahib can constitute ijma', and B, the relied upon position of the four madhahib constitute ijma'. Particularly when there's enough mubahatha, right? So let's take the Shafi school, right? Imam Nawawi comes to the scene, debates things. Okay, after him, Ibn Rif'ah debates things. That's the Ibn Rif'ah that had the debate with Ibn Taymiyyah, right? After him, Al-Isnawi, right? By that time, everybody's looking at these debates and they're saying the haqq is with the Nawawi, right? So even if you didn't say Imam Nawawi himself, you say, look, somebody comes along, there's this period of maturity, right? So it's like, khalas, now there's istiqrar, right? At this point on, everybody says that Imam Nawawi is the school, right? There's a certain point, Khalil comes along, right? He writes a matan, good, bad, and then there's a certain point where everybody does taslim to Khalil. Like every Maliki will say what Khalil says, that's the madhab. Nahnu Khaliliyun in, there's a quote, in dalla dalalna, right? Like we're with Khalil. If he goes astray, let us go with him. Like we have no problems, right? Like there's taslim, right? There's a certain point in the Hanbali school where khalas, this is so and so said this, so and so said this. But now, for example, these muhaqqiqeen all agree on this, right? They all agree on this, right? Karami says something. Who's the other one?
Woody?
No, it's okay. Bahuti, but there's somebody that they'll disagree. Bahuti and also an Egyptian. I can't remember the specifics. Anyway, but you can imagine there's certain khilaf, right? Which is what is the relied upon position. And there's a certain point where everybody agrees or everybody doesn't agree, right? So we, for example, in the Shafi school, will have like a certain stage where, the Khurasaniyin said this, the Iraqiyin said this. Khalas, by the time of Imam Nawawi and thereafter, we all agreed that the Khurasaniyin are right or the Baghdadiyin are right. Khalas, that's it. That's the madhab now. That is the Shafi school. And then we agreed to disagree between Ibn Hajar and Ramli. Ramli says something, okay, khalas, not a big deal, right? So there's certain levels of istiqrar where it's not one person. It is this group of huge scholars. They said the deen of Allah is this. And now you find the Shafi say that, the Maliki say that, the Hanbali say that, the Hanafi say that. So now you come along and say, oh no, I'm going to follow, for example, the position that music is halal. That exists within the madhahib, right? It exists. It is not just out. It's not just Ibn Hazm. It exists within the madhahib. But that is not the relied upon position of the Hanafi school or Maliki school or Shafi'i school or Maliki school. So now you come along and say, khalas, there's ijma' habibi. Right? That's ijma'. Right? So now you can see the dajjah or the whole inqilab, the whole like chaos when you now enter the 20th century and you say, here's the print of Ibn Hazm. Like, I'm not even talking about the mashhur of the Maliki school. I'm talking about everything is now up in arms, right? Everything is to be discussed now. Everything should be questioned now. So forget the madhahib, right? We're not even talking about the mu'tamad of the Shafi school or even the asah or sahih of the Shafi school. We're saying, yeah, it's all open. Everything's open. Let's go back to here. Right? So we have to understand that the Salafi movement had two sides, right? There is the Wahhabi side of it, which is Aqidah issues, these weird Sufis and Sufi beliefs and Asharis, these guys are crazy, right? That's one side of it, right? But then there's the other side of it, right? Which is to do with we need a bit of, like, we're in the 21st century now, or the 20th century now. The deen is too narrow. You guys, look, you had six positions, and now you have one, right? And it's like, in order to interact with you is very difficult. So we need to make the deen easier. وَمِن بَابِ التَّسْهِيلِ عَلَى النَّاسِ, we're going to mention all of these positions, right? And that's why you will find people, like we have a book in the Shafi school, a small book, it's called Rahmat al-Ummah, right? Rahmat al-Ummah. And it mentioned basically the former dhahib plus a bunch of other positions, right? As if all of them are open, they're just there, right? And there's problems with that, serious problems. And the two issues. Number one, here's this position of Ibn Abbas, okay? Number one, we've already agreed for the last 1,300 years that that's wrong, okay? B, we don't even know what he's saying, right? We don't. So now when you find people today who will say, no, it's okay to give fatwa outside the form of dhahib, they'll say, right, on the condition that there's indibat of that mas'ala, right? So we know what he was saying, right? So the issue is two things. Haven't we agreed for the last X amount of time that that's wrong? And B, what is he even saying? Right? So I remember this discussion I had one of my teachers. I said, you read the tarjama, for example, like the biography of some of these people, they're not small people. Like Ibn Hazm is not a fool. Dawood al-Zahiri is not a fool. Right? You see what Tajuddin Subki says about him. Like he's like this jabal, right? Kana jabalan fi ilm, right? So why can't I follow Dawood al-Zahiri? The answer is this. Dawood al-Zahiri came along, said something. People looked at it, disagreed. People looked at it again, disagreed. People agreed that it was wrong. So now you're saying, no, I want to follow it. That doesn't make any sense unless you're following shahwa, unless you're following rukhsa. You just want to make your life easy. Does that make sense? Like, it's not a normal process. Right? Like, who knows a civilization in the world that didn't use the wheel? One particular, I know these things because I have little kids that they do homeschooling, right? One civilization, they did not have wheels. They didn't use the wheel. And they didn't have any writing system either.
The Arabs?
No, they had writing system and they had wheels. Who are these people? They were the Aztecs, right? Or the Mayans, amazing mixing the two up. They didn't have wheels. So they had complex civilization and they had communication with like knots and things like that, but they didn't write, right? One of these is either the Mayans or the Aztecs. They had no wheels. So they were doing all these complex things, moving things around, organizing farming, all these other things with no wheels. So we go back and you say, oh, that's interesting. Should we revisit the use of not having wheels? Like, no, because everybody else in the world recognizes the use of wheels. It's a really useful technological tool. We're definitely going to use it, right? And so or you come along and say, I don't believe in electrons. I don't believe this is not real. Like a screen is not real. That's not a useful thing because we came along, we discussed what is matter and what is this. We all agreed on electrons. Sorry, Muhammad. I mean, Muhammad means like this guy's always talking about electrons. What's his problem, right? But someone's like, khalas, we agreed that electrons exist, right? And we use them all the time. We manipulate and subject electricity, the flow of electrons to our benefit all the time. You don't come along and start talking about do they exist or not. That's just not useful. And so the only reason you're doing this is because you want to marry this girl for the weekend. The only reason we want to do this is because you want to make everything halal. Like you're not doing this like, if you think about it, like Imam Shafi'i in the beginning of the Mukhtasar al-Muzani, right? In the beginning of Mukhtasar al-Muzani, Imam Muzani, he says that this is a summary of of Imam Shafi'i's kind of madhhab, bearing in mind that he forbade me to do taqleed, right? Like, don't just follow, right? So, and he says, why? To be careful. I don't do taqleed because you need to be careful. You can't just follow me and I might be wrong. And you're going to have to answer to Allah on Judgment Day, right? So, but it's very different. These people, they're not trying to, when they say, oh, there's more opinions, they're just trying to make the deen like faltan, like it's just there's no system to it. It's just all over the place, right? So issues, problems, mistakes, right? And I mean mistakes that the Salaf made or certain Salaf made, and the next generation said they are wrong. That's a mistake. And now you want to bring it in again. How do I know it's a mistake? Because they all disagreed on it. They all disagreed. Generation after generation after generation disagreed. Okay, khalas. There we go. Right? And that's the whole concept of Ummat Muhammad. Like you value Ummat Muhammad as opposed to I don't value Ummat Muhammad. Like this is a nation that's lost, right? Again, that's again part of that whole Salafi mentality is we actually were all lost, right? We were all doing shirk. We were all doing weird Ashariism. We were all following former dhahib. We need to go back to basics. Like there was something totally off about us, right? That's a problem, right? When you look at the whole of the ummah as off, or 99% of the ummah as off, that's a problem, right? That's a serious problem, right? But going back to now, we ask a technical question. Say, Fareed, are you literally saying that the former dhahib is ijma'? No, it's not ijma'. Right? I'm just saying that you could argue that. And are you literally saying that consensus that when a madhhab agrees on a position, that's final and done and that's it? No, I'm not saying that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes, it does.
So we have to be comfortable as tulab to play with ideas. Right? I can see why that might be true, and I can appreciate why that might be true, and I can use that in that way, right? At the same time, right? So, for example, the Hanbalis are here. Who can remember that nas? Somebody shared this, I believe it was Sheikh Abdul Ghani. He shared it in one of the groups. I don't know if you guys were in the same groups as I'm in. He shared this nas about following a position outside of the former dhahib, and he mentioned shahm al-khinzir. Can anybody remember that? So I'm pretty sure it's there in your late texts, like in Mara Academy or somewhere else where they said خلاص.
Yeah, Sheikh Mar'i, he's famous for allowing to follow any position that Mujtahid Mutlaq held. He said you can even follow Ibn Hazm, Ibn Taymiyyah, as
Exactly.
long as it doesn't break Ijma' and it's a Mujtahid Mutlaq.
Right. He's mujtahid mutlaq, and we understand, right? So and as long as there's no taqyid, there's no quyud that might be there. Like I don't know what your quyud are, right? So I don't know what's going on. But he said, khalas, this is what this person said. He's saying that you can eat pig fat. He's a mujtahid mutlaq, khalas. Who am I to say you can't follow him? Just because I disagree doesn't make him wrong, right? That's the whole point, right? So fihi ma fihi. What I'm saying, I'm not saying he's wrong and stuff. But like, who am I to speak against? I'm not the dust. I'm not worth the dust on the toenail of Mara and Karmi, right? But I'm just saying fihi ma fihi, right? Because along comes Ibn Hazm, said something. Who agreed with the Zahiriya aslan? Who agreed with your whole mabda? Nobody, right? Nobody agrees with you to begin with. Your whole mabda, the way that you think, is off. Who agrees with your position? It's off. So it's like, bro, there's nothing wrong with your position, you know? Fihi ma fihi, right? Big question mark. Like there's a big question mark there, right? So I come along and say, okay, khalas, I'm going to follow Sayyidina Umar. He said, if you need to make ghusl, tayammum doesn't count, and you just don't pray. That's his fatwa. You just don't pray, right? Is that valid now? I can just say, right? You just don't pray. Ibn Umar, if you touch your armpit, it breaks wudu, right? But you can't make wudu with seawater, right? So there's certain masail is like, Habibi, this is what are you talking about? Some of the Shafis they said this. They said you can make tawaf in London if you took a rock from. You could do Arafah in London if you took a rock from Arafah and just stood on the rock in London, right? So the Shafi's like, oh yeah, it's just a mistake. Sorry, right? Humans make mistakes. And then what catches you, The Ummah. The Ummah comes along, checks, edits out what is wrong, keeps in what is right. So there's a whole concept there. There's a whole idea there, right? And so, Wallahu alam, Allah knows best. Does that make sense, inshallah? But I just want the most important thing is if we don't believe in this system, right? Right. And also going back to the issue of is it ijma' or not? Muhammad Amin. So for example, is the relied, are the four madhhab ijma' or not? What my teachers have taught me, right? Like Sheikh Ahmed Hassanat, Sheikh Abdul Rashid, these people and others, is like Dr. Ahmed Hassanat, he's the Grand Mufti of Jordan now, right? Is basically if it's not the form of madhhab, if it's not A, the relied upon position in the Hanbali school, or B, a strong position in the Hanbali school, then it doesn't exist. Right? So you say, is this the relied upon position in the Shafi school? No. Is it a strong position, if not relied upon? Right? So yes, they agreed that it's not, but it's a strong position. If it's just a position, no, Habibi. So for example, the issue of music, right? Somebody comes up to me and say, is musical instruments, is it halal? Can I play a guitar? Right? For example, particularly if it's for da'wah. And I'm going to say, no. Okay, why? So didn't, and Hanbalis, you can correct me. Didn't Najmuddin al-Tufi, didn't he allow it? Didn't, who is it? Didn't many Malikis allow it for certain conditions, like in marriage, right? And certain things like that. Like Al-Qadi Abu Bakr ibn Arabi and others, Al-Qurtubi, I believe as well, for marriage and things like that. Didn't who is it? Abdul Ghani Nabulsi, didn't he allow it as well for tasawwuf, for dhikr and stuff like that? Like, didn't they allow music for things like that? They say yes. Say, is that a strong position in the Hanbali school? No. Is it a strong position in the Maliki school? No. Is it a strong position in the Shafi school? Is it a strong position in the Hanafi school? It is not a strong position. It's just a position. It exists. Right? So I'm going to say, la yajuz. Right? That's how I've been trained. Right? And that's how I see things as somebody who's inside the Shafi school. Right? Is that people will make mistakes. People quote things incorrectly. People say things incorrectly. People look at things incorrectly, right? People say things. And so I need the next generation to catch me. Where's my error? And they caught you, right? So I remember asking, for example, a Hanafi, and I said, listen, Sheikh Abdul Ghani Nabulsi, he allowed it. He wrote this whole essay, and they said, well, what did his student say? Right? The author, Ibn Abidin, what did he say? He rejected it. He said, you're wrong. Next generation, wrong. So there's a big difference between something that has wajaha, right? Qawl wajih fil madhhab, right? There's two positions, there's three positions in the madhhab. This is stronger. Like in the Shafi school, we'll have, khilaf al-asah, right? There's a strong debate, but this is better, right? Ibn Hajar says this, Ramli says this, okay, right? The Khurasanin said this, like a large throng, huge jama'at, ulama said this, jama'at said that, okay. Right, the Malikis, qawlan mashhuran, right? So the Malikis will have that. Then also say there's two strong positions, two correct positions on the issue, right? And then you come along and limit it. Okay, that's a bit annoying. But when you come along and say this is what's called like ittafaqu ala da'fihi, right? There's a quote from Imam Ahmad that he said this, but everybody, all the mutaakhirin say it's wrong, right? Everybody said that's wrong. It's a khata, right? There's a quote from Imam Abu Hanifa. There's a quote from Imam Malik. Imam Malik, for example, was cited saying that anal sex was halal. Right? All the late scholars like this is a mistake. What are you talking about? Imam Malik never said that. So now you come along and say, well, so-and-so said it. It's halal. Right? Like if you follow that, this is what you find the Salaf. Right? There's many, many quotes. Look in Kitab al-Ilm. Kitab al-Jami' fi Bayan al-Ilmi wa Fadlihi by Ibn Abdul Barr, right? Very important book. You see how many of the Salaf were against fringe opinions. They themselves, they were allergic to fringe opinions and they wanted to stick to the Jumhur, right? Stick with the Jumhur, right? And now today you come along and say, Al-Fatwa al-Madhahib al-18, and it's like, Habibi, لا أرتاح أبدا, right? I'm not there's, I remember asking Sheikh Ahmed Hassanat. I said, I was in California. We have a masjid, and the masjid is our school. Okay? The school and the masjid are the same thing. There are sisters who are teaching throughout the whole month, right, in the masjid. So you can imagine what the problem is, right? So I remember asking them, I said, listen, Ibn Hazm said this, Ibn Mundhir said this, right? And so we look at any of the form of madhhab, which of the form of madhhab allow a woman who is ha'id to remain in a masjid, right? So I'm looking for it doesn't have to be relied upon, but I want a strong position somewhere, right? I remember looking in the Hanbali school. So you have the masala of, for example, of the junub making wudu, right? Like there's some issues there and there's some debates, right? But then there's like the yanasun, like it doesn't include the ha'id, right? The ha'id cannot be there. So should I follow Ibn Hazm? Should I follow Al-Muzani? Should I follow Ibn Mundhir of the Shafi'is? And the Sheikh Ahmed Hassanat is like, I do not advise that at all. And that's for a need, like Habibi, this is an Islamic school in California, for crying out loud. Like there's a need for this, right? And he's saying no. Whereas something like Azhar, I know where they're going to go. Azhar, but yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it. It exists. Ibn Hazm said it, fine. Not a problem, right? Let them come to the masjid, even the menstruating. No, don't worry about it. Music is halal now, right? Music used to be haram, now it's halal, right? Read the Quran without wudu, right? Same this issue. Reading the Quran without wudu is a problem. Like Imam Shafi doesn't even discuss it. It's not even an issue that he discusses because it's kind of obvious it's haram. And now suddenly, this one position that 1% vote among the Sahaba and Tabi'een is now being implemented, and it's okay, don't worry about it. You can touch the Mus'haf without wudu, is not a problem. Because, tasheelan ala nas. It's a serious problem. And I'm not saying it's an easy, and I'm not trying to say that these people are fools and bad people, but I'm saying it's a very dangerous game. Like when you open that game, you need to leave the form of madhhab, and you leave this structure, and you leave a strong position. When you say, I can follow any position in any madhhab, even if it's weak, or even any position, it's very, very dangerous to say that. Very dangerous. Because the deen kind of falls apart. Right? So, in fact, there's positions that are within the form of madhhab, right? I know you guys have other classes to go to, but I'll mention three positions, okay? Three positions that are actually mu'tamad and they're dangerous. So sometimes even if it's mu'tamad, it's dangerous, okay? Or at least strong, okay? So I'll mention three positions. Number one, Dar al-Harb. Who knows this concept of Dar al-Harb?
Yes.
Right, I'm actually going to turn the recording off. I remember the discussion with Sheikh Abdul Rashid. So Sheikh Abdul Rashid, one of these key young, relatively young Shafi'is, very insignificant in Jordan, etc. I said, Sheikh Amjad, the Hanbalis, we have two positions, right, on the issue of the person who doesn't pray, right? You didn't pray for 10 years. What do you do? So we say you're either a murtad and يجب عليك القضاء, and that's the relied upon position, or you're a murtad ولا يجب عليك القضاء. Right? So either you left Islam, but you have to do qada of all your prayers you missed over those 10 years, right? Or you are a murtad and there's no qada. So I said, right, correct me if I'm wrong, Hanbalis, okay? So I spoke to Sheikh Amjad. I said, Sheikh Amjad, this is not a weak position in the Hanbali school, right? This is not a weak position. This is a strong position. The late scholars have debated it. Yes, the relied upon position is you have to make up those prayers, right? But there's a strong position you don't. Why don't we tell people this? Like, make life easier for them. Brother, sister, you're new to being religious. Let's just don't worry about qada, okay? Just don't worry about it, okay? Just don't worry about it. Why? And so what did he say? He said, Farid, in principle, it's fine, but what does it lead to, right? Or even the Hanbali school itself. So when you tell somebody on the minbar, whoever doesn't pray is a kafir, is that a safe thing to say in the minbar in front of everybody?
I don't think so.
right? Hanbalis, what do you think? Right? You're visiting, you're talking to young guys, and you tell them, yeah, actually, imanuka mukhtalif fihi, right? The person doesn't pray. And you say, well, it's debated whether or not you're a Muslim. He's there with his girlfriend, and you're telling him, well, some people say you're a Muslim, some people don't say you're a Muslim. Is that a useful thing to tell me?
I actually had a classmate in first year in university who apparently he started watching what's he called Muhammad Shamsuddin,
Hmm?
and I think he made takfir of his mother
Al-Sheikh
for not
Al-Awwal,
praying.
Muhammad Shamsuddin. No, go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah. I said I think he made takfir of his mother after speaking with her because she doesn't pray.
Yeah, so is that useful?
No.
No. So what we will say is you're in a class, okay? You're now with your sheikh. The sheikh says, listen, this is mukhtalifi. So they say, رُبَّ عِلْمٍ يُرْوَى ثُمَّ يُطْوَى, right? There's certain sacred knowledge that is we share in this class, right? We are Hanbalis. We do ضبط of the mas'ala. What do we mean? What does it mean? Diyanatan. What does it mean? Qada'an. The ikhtilaf with Abdul Ghani, right? So with the Ibn Qudama, his opinion, these different things, we understand it, we apply it, but that shouldn't really be shared with that many people. Let alone you come and tell people, oh, sister, don't worry, you don't have to make up the prayers. Why? Because you were a kafir the whole time. So if you were a kafir for the last 10 years, what does it mean about your marriage?
Invalid.
It's invalid. What does it mean about inheritance? Oh, 5 years ago, your dad died and you inherited the house. That's not your money anymore. That's not your house. You were a kafir when he died. Oh, so the house is not mine? No, the house is not yours. Okay, what does it mean about wulat al-Muslimin? Right? What does it mean about the rulers? What does it mean about 70% of the ummah? Right? It's a very dangerous fatwa. So I'm not saying it's wrong. We're not saying that it's wrong. We're saying it shouldn't be shared because what does it lead to? Right? People already have rocky marriages and suddenly, oh, your wife didn't get up for Fajr. Now you start having these wasawis, right? So it's something that we got to keep it within its limits, right? And when you go and tell people, brother, you don't have to do qada because it's okay, you are a kafir the whole time, it's a very dangerous thing to do. It's better to be a sinful Muslim who's not doing qada than to be a Muslim who starts saying, well, hang on a minute, if I don't pray, then I can just go and drink and commit zina, right? And then when I decide to enter Islam again, I'll do that. Does that make sense? It's a very dangerous thing. Go ahead, Muhammad Amin.
This is maybe a bit besides the point, but in this case specifically, I think it's just a misapplication of the Hanbali position because the quyud are not there for takfir.
Okay, but so
Because the way they explain it sort of goes back to so they explain a certain scenario. If it takes place, it sort of goes back to juhud salah. So
right.
they say you have to go in front of the qadi. He will threaten you. He will tell you he'll
leave
kill
Islam.
you.
So you couldn't leave Islam by yourself. You'd have to be taken to the qadi. He takes a sword out and he says, "Pray, otherwise I'll kill you." And you're like,
Yeah,
"No."
and they say if he's so stubborn that he refuses to even pretend to pray in front of the qadi or threatened with death, and clearly he doesn't believe in
Right,
salah.
right. So now I
So
come
it's like a qarina that he has juhud.
exactly. So it's like they have the masala of the shahada. Like, do you have to give the shahada to become Muslim? No. Okay, what if I took you by yourself in a place where you are safe, nobody's hearing you? There's no reason why you wouldn't do the shahada, but yet you refuse, right? So they say you don't have to do the shahada, but it's impossible for somebody who believes in Allah and believes in Islam, who has no fear of anybody finding out, or his parents are going to find out, or the police are going to find out anything. He still doesn't do it, right? So they have that same kind of issue. So even better, right? So I came along and said, Habibi, the Ummah has disagreed. Some people say there's no qada because you're a kafir. And in reality, all the quyud were there anyway, right? All the quyud were not there anyway. So even more so, right? So even another reason why you didn't do this is that if I, as a Shafi'i, I have like all these Hanbali books next to me and I read Hanbali fiqh, if I don't understand the Hanbali fiqh properly, then how can I give fatwa on the 4 madhahib and the 18 madhahib? Because maybe Ibn Hazm will come out of the grave and he'll say, no, I didn't mean that kind of music. I meant this kind of music. Like, oh, right? Like maybe he said, for example, Ibn Hazm says, you can eat pig meat if it's like this, like, right? So there's a lot of things that can be very problematic. So my point is, generally is, even if it was relied upon, even if it was strong, it could be very, very dangerous. It could be very dangerous, right? Okay. Another issue, I'll give another issue then is Bay al-Aina. So Bay al-Aina in the Shafi school is halal. So Bay al-Aina is I have this cup in front of me. Okay, this cup is worth 50 cents. Okay, I say, here you go, I'm giving you this cup for $1 million. That's fine now, Muhammad Amin, and anybody else has to leave. Okay, I'm giving you this cup for $50. Okay, for $1 million. Here you go. I'm selling this cup for $1 million in cash. Give me $1 million now. You give me this $1 million in cash. Okay, you sell it back to me for $1.1 million in credit. So what have I effectively done?
Kind of
Riba.
riba.
Riba. So the Jumhur, the Hanabila, the Malikiya, the Hanafiya, they all say this is haram. This is haram. You've just done riba as a hila, as a trick. The Shafis, that's a key concept for Imam Shafi. We don't believe in istihsan. You cannot do that. You can't just say it's haram even though the two contracts are halal. Khalas, it's halal, right? So here's a question. Why don't we apply that? Like, why don't we just, I'm sure you could do some kind of very clever thing where you can use credit cards and we do it as a bay ul aina on the Shafi school instead, or for a loan on a house, right? I'll do it as bay ul aina in the Shafi school. Why not?
Because it is dangerous.
Because it's dangerous. So my point is that even when it's relied upon, we are still careful of it. I gave the example of the Hanafi school, gave the example of the Hanbali school, gave the example of the Shafi school, right? Even when it's relied upon, or even when the qawl has wajaha, the position is not weak, it's there, right? So now we're asking, should I just give fatwa on any position at all of any of the mujtahid imams, even if the later scholars disagreed on it? I'm saying by no means, because even if it's within the form of madhhab, sometimes we would say don't do it, because what it leads to, the danger, right? So when you say, no, it's okay, open all the floodgates, follow any position that any mujtahid is ever quoted to have said, you have a serious problem. Do you know what he's saying? Did the next generation agree or disagree? Does that make sense? And that second part is really important. Okay, it's really, really important. So that's why I say read the book, the essay, it's not a book. الرد على من لم يلتزم المذاهب الأربع أو من لم يتبع المذاهب الأربع by Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali. It's in English, translated by Sheikh Musa Ferber. And B, the whole concept of civilization, right? C, the Muqaddimah of Ibn Khaldun. And what does civilization do? Civilization seeks to achieve a goal, follow the Quran and Sunnah, and we get to this point, we edit things out. And we get to a point where the Ummah has agreed on something, that is the deen of Allah. Right? Even if in principle these positions were said in the past, and in principle there's some argument for it. Okay? Very important. Inshallah, we'll stop here. Go ahead, Arya. Sorry, you had a question?
Yes, I want to ask, why do we not say directly it isn't the martamat if it feels so dangerous to apply it?
Say it again,
Like,
sorry.
why don't we say it is haram to do something like that if we say it is too dangerous to apply it?
Because when we say it's too dangerous to apply, that is in reality part of the toolkit and part of the skill set of the advanced mufti / scholar. Okay, So there's a difference between learning the rules of a game and how it's played by an expert. Does that make sense? So what are the rules of soccer versus how it's actually played? So same thing in fiqh. You're going to have the rules of qawaid fiqh, the rules of usul fiqh. And then you have the mufti. The grand mufti, this mufti, the people, the imam has something about him, these other skill set, which is kind of different. It's a something else. Does that make
Okay,
sense?
so it's
So it's kind of like, so you will find, so you may find they disagree, but in general, they agree on that kind of art, if that makes sense. So for example, the issue of, interest in the West, there's one Hanafi scholar in America. He's like, Habibi, this is a strong position in the school. There is a need for it. Go ahead. Go ahead, buy a house on interest, it's fine. Right? There are others who say, okay, like Azhar would say, well, there's also harm in making the deen hard, right? And people are leaving the deen, so make it easy for them, right? So what I'm trying to say is it's a kind of, it's an art, and people will do it in different ways. Does that make sense? But they will all do it, right? They will all do it. They will all do it at some element. You will see that they will. There's a certain thing that they'll do, right? When this person is like a seasoned mufti, a seasoned scholar, they look at things. It's not as simple as that, right? It's not. It's like the engineer versus like the grand architect of a city. Like I can build a bridge, but it's not that simple. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely.
Or a parent. Child has to go to sleep at 8 p.m. Child did not go to sleep at 8 p.m. Child gets computer game taken away next day. Not like that. It's a much more nuanced. So we are humans. We interact with these human science of fiqh and hadith, etc., and language, and there's a lot more to it than that. There's a third dimension. And this is what our, people are losing, and people will lose more with the AI world, is because they will lose the third dimension that you get from your teacher. But it's not as simple as that. And they may make be easier or stricter, or they look at things in different ways, or they try and achieve different goals in different kind of ways, use fiqh in a certain way, and you don't even understand, you're just lost because it's something else that you don't have. Does that make sense?
Yes, Jazakumullah khairan.
Whereas somebody who's just applying the rules, they're like, what is halal? I can follow it. What's wrong with that? Who's seen that Brazilian lady? There's this Brazilian niqabi who plays the electric guitar. Who's seen that video? Right? There's this lady in Brazil. She's a convert, right? And she used to play electric guitar. And then she's there on stage with like total niqab, right? And it just looks really, really weird, right? And you just look at it like, this person understands certain rules or was given certain rules, but doesn't have a proper shape of the deen. Like it's just off. Anybody who look at it, it's just like, it looks off. There's something wrong with it. It doesn't fit, right? Like it doesn't go together. But she doesn't have that because her deen is not like that. Her deen is not a deen of shuyukh, a deen of understanding the deen as a whole thing. It's just picking this, picking here, picking there, right? And that's where we're going. Where it's like the whole picture is off. Where Muslims had this art of being Muslim, and then it's all going to get lost, right? Where there's certain things that are right and certain things, but it's just all off, right? Or you see, for example, there's many things like that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, shall I stop here? Inshallah, wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Jazakum khair. My apologies for going over time today.